Dune Prophecy has kept me scratching my head and wondering what the story they're trying to tell will be after the dust settles, and it provides some answers to its many mysteries. While it involves a large ensemble and is generally about the formation of the Bene Gesserit, it's been my understanding that this is Valya Harkonnen's story as much as anything else. She is the Mother Superior and the center of the Sisterhood, but to this point I've kind of been in agreement with what her uncle Abeny said about her before she let him die in the closing moments of this episode. She feels like a corrupting force, and even if she claims to be a true believer in Raquel's idea of creating better rulers and advancing humanity, most of the moves she's made have been about securing or holding on to power. I've seen a couple of people point out that even when it comes to the voice, she first realized she could use it to save Griffin's life, using it for good without a doubt. Every time since, what has she used it for? Kieran Atreides, who we learned in this episode, is the son of the young boy from the flashback who Tula spared during her massacre, the same actor who plays Oscar Tully if you watch House of the Dragon. When Ynez insists her father's a good man, Kieran says if you give one person that much power, the only path becomes to try to preserve it. So far, it's hard to see where Valya is any different. She has survived the agony and connected with her other memory, but other than telling Tula they have a different purpose now after that experience, the show hasn't spent much time showing us how it changed her, which is fine, I suppose. Sometimes watching an anti-hero be bad is entertaining enough, but given that this is a Sunday night HBO show, I can't believe I would be the only person thinking there must be more to it. One thing we know for sure that motivates her is the prophecy that was passed on from Raquel's deathbed. This is where the show feels like it could really surprise me, especially with Lila returning at the end of this episode, and in case you didn't pick up on it, Tula points out she is now reborn in spice. I'll come back to the details on that, but I've mentioned in previous videos how when it comes to prophecy, things like misinterpretations or self-fulfilling prophecies are preferable since those are about the character's actions. How things are playing out with Lila is starting to tick those boxes, and what I think works best is that both Harkonnen sisters are complicit in making it happen. Valya for pressing to put Lila through the agony without the training, and Tula for manipulating her and then trying to bring her back with this spice cure. Desmond and what's happening with his weirdness could become the second most interesting presence now that Lila is back on the scene. The episode opens with nightmares. Back in the first episode, there were a lot of bad dreams that happened when Desmond first walked into the palace. And it sort of feels like these are related to Lila. It all seems to be connected to the prophecy with this recurring image of glowing blue eyes that they all get to eventually in Tula's drawing experiment. Drop a little spice, tune in, and let it take you where it takes you based on your dreams. They all draw the worm, or Shai Halud as Sister Avila likes to call him, which I thought was a Fremen term, but okay, and they all draw the scary blue eyes on black, which all visions in the series have ended with. What that will turn out to be is a little beside the point. Lore-wise, if you focus primarily on the main series and the term Arafel that came up in the prophecy, you'll get to one place. If you expand things a bit and include Brian Herbert's books, which this show is connected to, then you could end up in a different place. What seems more important now is that it connects these things together, but also makes things happen. Raquel saw the eyes in a vision right before she died. Same for Kasha. Emmeline's dream almost led her to cutting her own throat, and she would have gone through with it if Jen hadn't somehow been unaffected so that she was there to stop her. Tula lost control of the drawing exercise, and it seemed like this force had taken over. In the short term, this is turning the acolytes towards Dorothea's point of view. We see some of them gathering and reading the Orange Catholic Bible, which is exactly what we saw Dorothea's zealots do in the flashbacks to the early days of the Sisterhood. The official story in relation to her death was that she became overwhelmed with grief and took her own life. And it's interesting because when Emmeline brings this up, she tries to use the true sense on Tula to try to figure out if that's the real story. We know it isn't. Valya used the voice to set her death in motion because she was a threat to the breeding program and the secret thinking machine that just brought Lila back to life. This encounter sets up the dream Tula has later, where Emmeline accuses her of murdering Dorothea, Ori, and the other Atreides, and says that these actions will bring the reckoning to their order. Dream Tula slits her throat, and there's a series of flashes that come on the screen of Lila, Dorothea, the Atreides, and a thumper in the desert before the school is crushed under the weight of sand, burying it. She wakes up to notice Lila gone from the tank, and after she powers up the computer, she sees her emerge from the darkness. Her eyes are blue from the massive dose of spice she had. Anyone who's seen any of the Dune movies will recognize this, or in the show Sister Michaela has them. So if you didn't take that into consideration, there is a straight one-to-one connection with the eyes from the visions and dreams. Anna Rule, the Sisterhood's thinking machine, also has a blue glow when it comes online, and the sound design of the eye image features machine sounds. You can't miss them. Blue also features prominently on the drone that the rebels purchased from the Ixian to wipe out the Landsraad. A thing that stands out to me when she's talking to her unconscious body in the tank before this happens is when Valya applies the twice-born, once in blood, once in spice line to Desmond, she thinks he's the reckoning that's coming. When Tula applies it to Lila, she thinks she'll somehow be a necessary part of overcoming it. In the end, Lila's awakening brings up more questions than answers, but at least for now, Tula is thrilled that she survived. Considering we saw Dorothea take over during the agony, and we had that scene with the acolytes who are sort of becoming her followers, I think it's pretty much guaranteed that Dorothea will return, and it's an open question as to how much Lila is still in there. I mentioned before that a type of possession happens in the later books. I wouldn't be surprised if this leads to Tula having to remove Dorothea from the board again, which would also be tragic given her history with Lila. Another thing to remember is massive amounts of spice can unlock prescience, or visions of the future in the Dune universe. Remember, Paul was having dreams of the future that got stronger when he was exposed to spice on Arrakis, and then again when he endured his agony. The show could be using Lila to reintroduce this concept earlier in the timeline. I mentioned the plot to use a drone to kill the Emperor and members of the Landsraad. This is something that Valya and the Sisterhood have been coordinating with Michaela's help, and she plans on stopping the plot as it plays out to regain the Emperor's favor. If she can get him to listen to her again, she can move against Desmond Hart. Several things conspire to undermine the plan, but we get the answer to why she went and reconnected with her family at the end of the last episode. She uses her nephew Haro to get her into the room. As Theodosia's reading points out, he's very susceptible to stepping into that role. She uses the Sisterhood to get the other houses to back his placement so they can use him to call for an inquest into Pruitt's murder. Most of the heavy lifting ends up being carried out by Ynez, who can't get on board with the murder of her would-be child husband. When Haro starts to balk at calling out the Emperor, she swoops in and does it for him. The surprise player here is the Empress, who I'll definitely be keeping an eye on for the rest of the series. It turns out that she was the one who was circulating the rumors of Pruitt's murder. Something Uncle Abeny assumed was the Sisterhood, and Natalia gives Desmond the upper hand by leading him to different individuals who are known to be dealing in illegal thinking machines. He has them rounded up and completely steals Valya's thunder by admitting to killing Pruitt, but reframing it as an execution rather than a murder. He then presents the drone and the conspirators, including Horus, which puts Kieran in an uncomfortable spot. Then Desmond uses his newfound momentum and his gift of burning people inside out to stage a public execution. And that's that for Valya's chance to save the day. It may be a little more dramatic and a lot more deadly than what he would have drawn up himself, but this achieves exactly what the Emperor wanted. The great houses have to think twice before making a move against House Corrino. It comes at a cost though, which we see as Desmond is recovering. It was apparent that there was a mental or emotional toll, but now we know there is a physical one as well. Taking a step back, I find it interesting how similar Empress Natalia's move here is to what Valya was trying to do. There have been several moments where it's obvious that she wasn't the Sisterhood's biggest fan, and she had good reason for that, but by giving up the thinking machine dealers at such an opportune time makes me wonder if there isn't more going on there, because that's the thing. In his spectacle, Desmond is rallying against the banned technology. That's something that everyone can agree on post-Butlerian Jihad. But we know from his own admissions that his real motivation is to take down the Sisterhood. So again, keeping our eyes on Desmond to try to figure out how this encounter with the sandworm on Arrakis landed him here with the ability to do what he does, but also now paying a little more attention to Natalia, who may have more going on than just being upset that Kasha's guidance sort of took her husband away from her, took away some of that control that she had over her own family. She may be hiding some things herself. The physical toll the spectacle takes on Desmond also produces some blood that could be the saving grace for a woman with access to the universe's most complete DNA database. Valya can send the sample to Tula, and we might start getting some real answers about where Desmond came from. To return to where we started, Valya does choose to let her uncle Abeny die at the end of the episode. He does manage to bring up how she corrupted Griffin and Tula, and when he eventually falls out of his chair that floats around on suspensors, I finally made the connection that this makes you think of how his descendant, Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, moves around 10,000 years in the future. Her response to his criticisms is to say she will not apologize for what she did or for her strength. She believes everything she did to get where she currently is was necessary, and she'll continue to do whatever it takes to stay there, even if it means withholding his inhaler and letting him expire to have him out of her way. Before that, she says she chose the Sisterhood because they saw her, and more specifically because they recognized her potential. Griffin was the only Harkonnen who was worth a damn because he saw it too. I'm not sure how Tula fits in there, but Valya does take offense at the idea that she abused her love. The point of it all is that her house is nothing without her, which hints at mixed allegiances, at the very least for someone who preaches the Sisterhood above all to her adherents. As he takes his last breath, she says if he'd followed her like Tula did, it wouldn't be the Sisterhood that towers in the Imperium. It would be House Harkonnen. So, okay, she's really drinking her own Kool-Aid, but things don't end there. Theodosia could see what was transpiring and decided to use this hidden gift, which she would prefer you not call it that, and came into the room as the long-deceased Griffin Harkonnen. It was a little odd when it played as a dream, which was my initial impression since there was a lot of that going around this episode. But as far as I could tell, it seemed like this apparition was there to offer her closure, or to ease her mind about whether she went too far pushing her brother to go after Vorian Atreides to correct the record about what he said about their family and what caused them to lose their status. He says all the things she would want to hear, and in a way makes it so she could just keep on doing what she's been doing without a guilty conscience. But the twist comes when we find out it wasn't a dream, but that Theodosia's hidden ability is to turn into a different person, more or less. It's similar to what the Talaxu face dancers do in the later main series books, and while this may just be an early proto version of what we'll see then, it's a thing that happened, and the episode ends there. Overall, this was a mixed bag of an episode for me. Some parts worked better than other parts, but I was already all in to see where they're going with Desmond, and now with Lila as well. I read some of the Brian Herbert books before the season started, and have been rereading the later books in the main series as I've been watching, and there are some really cool connections they could be working towards. I can't say that it's leaning one way or the other though, and that probably makes sense considering the estate wouldn't see that as a thing. I think of it as the books I read growing up and then this other bunch of books by a different but related author later, but canonically, it's all the same in their eyes. I do expect Dorothea to cause some problems, which will be difficult for Tula to deal with since there will still be some of Lila in there. Not sure how this will affect the Sisters Harkonnen or the Sisterhood in general. I still expect that someone is behind whatever's going on with Desmond, but this episode didn't reveal much. His blood should be a big part of that, but who's to say what that's going to reveal? We've just got 2 episodes left, so answers are coming, and I think that's a great place to leave things. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.